Across East Africa, the walls around civic space are closing in. From Uganda to Tanzania, Kenya to Ethiopia, governments are tightening their grip on freedoms once taken for granted: freedom of expression, assembly, and association. Indeed, civil society organizations are being restricted. Journalists face harassment, protesters are met with force, and new laws are being crafted not to protect citizens, but to silence them. In Uganda, for example, laws targeting NGOs have shut down critical voices and stifled dissent. In Tanzania, media outlets have faced suspensions, fines, and threats simply for doing their job. And in Ethiopia, escalating conflicts have brought renewed crackdown on civil liberties. This isn't just about rights, it's about power. A shrinking civic space weakens democracy, stifles accountability, and disconnects leaders from the people they serve or that they are meant to serve. Yet, despite the risk, activists, journalists, and everyday citizens continue to speak out. Their courage is a reminder that civic space is not a gift from government. It is a right, and it must be defended. Because when civic space closes, so too does the path to justice, equity, and progress. This week, we will be taking a closer look at the state of civic space in East Africa as countries in the region, including Tanzania and Uganda, prepare for major national elections in 2025 and early into 2026. Before I introduce our guest today, I would like to use this moment to say thank you for the overwhelming support this podcast channel has enjoyed since we premiered just recently. Thank you for the comments, the likes, the share, and those who have subscribed to the channel. We appreciate you all. We want to encourage all to please continue to comment, like, and subscribe to this page if you have not already done so. Now, I will be back right after this short break to introduce our guest for the day. Hello there, and thank you once again for joining us on this week's episode of Podcast Unfiltered. As I indicated in the opening section, that this week we will be discussing issues about civic space, that by having a guest join us from Kampala, Uganda. Our guest today is Mr. Joe Kija. He's the Associate Director at the Innovations for Democratic Engagement and Action, IDEA. Job is a leading columnist, is a public affairs analyst, and who has contributed to several journals, books. Job, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Bod. In Kampala, it is evening, so I should say good evening, especially for the people that are in East Africa. And then for you, I know it should be something around mid-morning. And I should say good morning to you and the rest of the colleagues in your area code.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, I mean, the issues I've kind of laid out in the introductory section. I want us to take a deep dive into the state of civil society in East Africa. You know, I mentioned earlier that Tanzania is preparing for elections, I think in October of this year. And Uganda is equally
Yes.
preparing for elections, though the main elections are not until first week of January 2026. But discussions, debates in the public square is already looking into that area. But one major concern is, how do we assess the civic space in East Africa, right now, against the background of these very critical elections that citizens are expected to participate in? So maybe you just want to first and foremost describe for us what the civil society environment looks like currently in East Africa. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe just to start it off, of course, you did mention that elections are happening in Tanzania in October this year, and then in Uganda, the national elections will be happening next year in January. But I need to state that in both Tanzania and Uganda, elections have already actually started, because as we speak, Tanzania held its local government elections sometime last year towards the end. And then in Uganda, already we have kicked off with the primary elections for different political parties. For instance, the National Resistance Movement last week actually Parliament and even Cabinet did not sit because they were conducting their party primaries for local council one elections. So elections have already actually started in both countries. And then also what you need to take note of is that in 2027, Kenya will be having their national elections. Now, something interesting happens around elections. So there's a trend which has been going on in the region whereby what happens in Tanzania, because usually Tanzania has the elections first, shapes what happens in Uganda, and then what happens in Uganda then shapes what happens in Kenya, and the cycle continues. So there's a lot of things, good and bad, that are picked from each other. I keep telling my colleagues in civil society that, there seems to be a template of manners, especially bad manners, that the regimes in these three East African countries are picking from. They are learning from each other a lot. So there's a lot of things, similarity between the manner in which the state in Tanzania behaves towards the state, towards its citizens, similar to the way the state in Uganda behaves in respect to its citizens, and then again similar to the way the state in Kenya behaves in relation to its citizens. But maybe just really to add, already if I may dive in terms of what is going on in the environment, especially in
Yeah, please
respect to
go
the
ahead.
bad mannerisms that I'm making reference to, is that as we speak in Tanzania, Chadema, the leading opposition party, has been banned as a party. What that means is that they will not participate in the next elections at all levels. Now, what we are hearing from the grapevine is that actually there's a likelihood to ban the leading political party in Uganda, which is the National Unity Platform. And I will not be surprised to see, of course, Kenya, for them, usually during every election, there's a new political formation that emerges in terms of the opposition. I would also not be surprised to hear that in Kenya, they will borrow from that template and also do something similar and ban the leading political party. So just really to give an example of how the bad manners in one country influences the actions in the next country shapes up. That is a perfect example that I can give. But also, if you look at the manner in which the opposition is treated in Kenya, in Tanzania, and in Uganda, it is the same thing. Back in the day, I think some years back, we had that Tundu Lissu, the leading opposition, the leader of opposition in Tanzania, was shot at, I think, more than 17 times. He actually had to be airlifted, I think, to the US in order for him to get treatment. He came back as we speak. A few weeks back, actually, he was arrested. And what followed then, of course, is the banning of his political party from taking part in the elections. It is not different from what has been happening in Uganda, because As you may recall, just sometime late last year, Bobby Wine, the leading opposition politician in Uganda, was also shot at with a rubber bullet. He was hospitalized for some time, but that was not the first time. He has been arrested several times, locked up, charged with fictitious charges of possession of firearms and military stores. But then, as we speak, also actually one of the leading opposition figures, that is Dr. Kiza Besigye, has been held for close to 5 months now. In Luzira prison, and again he's being charged with treason. So in Kenya, it is not any different. You'll find that a number of opposition politicians are time and again arrested. They are brutalized. They are charged with fictitious charges, etc. In the case of Uganda, Tanzania, and even Kenya, there's a growing trend of abductions. This is not even arrest, it is abductions. People are being abducted. Because you see, arrest, the authorities must approach me with an order to arrest me and then take me and detain me in a gazetted location of gazettement. But what's happening now is that people are just picked up, they disappear for weeks, some months. Actually, as we speak in Uganda, we have 18 people that have been missing for 4 years. We don't know where they are. They are affiliated to the National Unity Platform. There are a couple of others that were also picked up and locked up in and underwent a military trial. Up to now, they have actually not been released. 4 years later, their cases have not been disposed of, and there are so many figures like that. Dr. Kiza Besigye, sometime towards the end of last year, was abducted in Kenya, driven all the way to Uganda, taken into a military court, and up to now he has been detained, and his case has not yet been heard. His arrest actually followed, or his abduction, let me say, followed the abduction of 36 other individuals that were affiliated to his party that had gone for training in Kenya. I think it was Kisumu, and they were also just abducted, brought back to Uganda, locked up, and just I think last week the charges of treason and I think we are talking about treason and terrorism training were quashed by the courts. So there's a lot of fictitious charges that are being dumped onto the people in the opposition, and it's not any different by the from civil in respect to civil society, because you'll find that it is the same kind of treatment that civil society is also progressively being subjected to. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that broad outlay of the issues. The other question I would like to throw some light on for us is what are the main tools that you see these governments using to restrict civic space, in it were? So maybe, as you said, that what goes on in one country kind of, affects the other. Let me call it copycat syndrome. Do you see some commonalities in terms of those tools that the respective governments are applying to restrict freedom and the opportunities for civil society to really have a voice in the affairs of their respective countries?
Yeah, so there is of course, there are a couple of similarities in terms of the tools that are being used to curtail civic space. First, you realize that I mean, it's now no longer a secret that internet, for instance, will be shut down during elections, or even during any period that seems to be quite politically active. So internet will be shut down in Uganda, it will be shut down in Kenya, it will be shut down in Tanzania. That one is an expectation. In Uganda's case, it has happened twice. In 2016, social media was cut off and mobile money. And then in 2021, the entire internet was shut down. So that for Uganda, we are not even debating. We know that it will happen. So all we need to be, one of the challenges really we are grappling with as civil society and even as um, crusaders of democracy and human rights, is that how do we navigate this question of internet shutdown? Because we know that during elections, internet will be shut down. So that is number one. The second one is obnoxious laws. Bad laws are being considered for both civil society and even democracy crusaders. In Uganda, we are grappling with the with the Non-Governmental Organizations Act, which really subject civil society to a broad spectrum of curtailment. Fast forward, and I will talk a bit about that in terms of where we are, because there's a process of reviewing that, where I can talk about it. You'll find that we had the Public Order Management Act, which really was curtailing civic expression, freedoms of assembly and association. In that, well, the law provides that provided that you need to notify the police. But what the police did, before you have a public gathering, what the police did was to make it mandatory for you to get permission from them in order for you to convene a public gathering. But also, what was happening is that when you write to them to notify them, they continuously blocked those gatherings using the Public Order Management Act. They would not allow you. Now, what happened, of course, is that we challenged that law in the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. There's a Section 8 was thrown out, which was more or less requiring civil society, no citizens, to get clearance from the police before they can convene their meeting. It was declared unconstitutional. Now, as we speak, the Attorney General, out of time for filing an appeal, actually has filed to appeal, because this is the law was thrown out in 2019. 6 years later, the Attorney General is appealing a decision of 6 years ago, which really is really strange that court can even entertain the Attorney General to come up with such an appeal. Now, we also have a couple of other tools that are being deployed by the regime. Physical attacks on citizens, on activists, they're happening, abductions, shootings. Now, arrests, stranger arrests. When you're arrested, we've heard of so many people that are returning from abduction and from arrests that have actually been tortured. We have even had strange cases of some of them being sodomized, which really, really is quite unfortunate, especially for a country like Uganda, where we have an anti-homosexuality law. Now, there are other tools that are being applied by the regime in Uganda. For instance, there's a negative narrative that is traded around civil society and civic activists, calling them all sorts of names, agents of foreign interests, saboteurs. Most recently, sometime last year, the Speaker of Parliament referred to them as bomb shafters, the promoters of homosexuality. So there's all this narrative that is actually created by state agents, as high even as the president, because the president has also been on record several times labeling civic activists as agents of imperialism, agents of foreign interests, etc. Because time and again they get funding from foreign sources. But if you ask the question who the biggest beneficiary of foreign funding is actually the government that he leads, because he has been the biggest beneficiary of foreign aid. Recently, we're talking about the USAID, the cut on USAID. Actually, the government of Uganda, just one ministry of health, has lost in excess of US dollars 500 million, which is really, really a lot. So the question
That's
is
a lot.
the agent of imperialism? It's a lot. It's really, really a lot. So the point is that there's this negative narrative that is usually traded around in respect to civic actors, civil society, and even democracy crusaders.
Thank you so much. So now, well, hearing all of these, one would want to imagine that perhaps there is no hope. But one thing that we can say is that civil society, including the NGO sector, the media, they are known for their resilience, even in the face of challenges like this? Do you see that manifesting? How are civil society organizations like yourself, activists, and even the media establishments, are they adapting in the face of these challenges that they face from the government and the measures being taken against them?
So of course, adaptability is really, really important, but also pushing back is the other option that we are using. In terms of adaptability, one of the things that we have really time and again stressed to civil society actors is that, of course, the regime comes with administrative um, um, acts, which I mean, things like compliance, etc. So we've really kept compelling our colleagues to try as much as possible and be compliant, such that when the regime comes for them, at least on some of the basics, um, they are they are well, they are not really caught off guard. But also, and I've been stressing to my colleagues in the sector, that there is no form of compliance that is going to stop this regime from targeting you for as long as they realize that what you are doing is checking or shaking the status quo. Now, I need to mention that during the last elections, a number of organizations, the National NGO Forum, the Uganda Women's Network, etc., their bank accounts were frozen out of the blue. These are the organizations that are helping. The Uganda Women's Network is helping, for instance, women's organizations to be compliant. The National NGO Forum is helping national organizations. Their bank accounts were frozen. Chapter 4, one of the leading organizations in terms of protection of civic space and provision of pro bono legal aid to civic activists, but even civil society, was also suspended indefinitely in terms of their work, but also their bank accounts were frozen. Their executive director, Nicholas Opie, was arrested over flimsy things. They accused him of money laundering. They accused the organization of money laundering. When we tried to check on which money they had laundered, this is money which was coming from a donor that was credible, that had been supporting them for over 5 years. And of course, later on, court declared that the government claims were really, really empty. But this organization is one of those organizations that was actually helping other organizations to also comply. They slapped on them a charge of not filing annual returns. Yet actually, they had been even helping other organizations, going an extra mile to help other civic organizations to comply, to file their returns, etc. So I keep telling my colleagues that, as you prepare yourself, just you need to grow a thick skin, have it in your programming that any day the regime is going to come for you, whether you've done right or wrong. In most cases, of course, you'll find that these organizations actually are not doing anything wrong when they are targeted. But really, to answer your question directly, is that the organizations are trying to, first of all, put their systems to order, make sure that things are right within their organizations, but also trying to build solidarity with other organizations such that we can hold each other, because like the saying goes, a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So we try as much as possible to work together, to speak out together, to defend each other's space, provide pro bono legal services for those that may need and don't even have money to pay lawyers, etc. When someone is arrested, we all come up and demand the release of that person, issue statements, etc. But also, the other tool that we are using is pushing back against some of these draconian actions, but also the draconian laws. We are really trying as much as possible to use the courts of law. Of course, unfortunately, in Uganda, the courts are also captured. They are compromised. They have cadre judges. So we are filing public interest litigations, strategic litigations, but of course, usually the judges and magistrates at the lower levels, they frustrate justice. And we've had a judge who has, for instance, gone in a public space and declared that the civil society, they are just mere accounting to their donors, they are taking cases to court which are wasting their time, and so civil society should not expect court to entertain those cases. And that same judge has actually gone ahead and apparently prepared guidelines for strategic litigation to guide other judges in the civil division of the High Court. Unfortunately, that person has now been promoted to the Court of Appeal, and we know that cases which he had and messed up at the lower level actually are going to find him in the Court of Appeal. So yes, one of the tools we are using is the courts, especially the Constitutional Court, which has not been really bad in terms of ruling in favor of citizens, or in terms of in favor of civil society. But sadly, what we are seeing is that those courts are also being littered with the cadres of the regime. And so to expect that we shall get justice from those courts in the near future is also something that is really, really complicated.
So thank you. I mean, it's very instructive that you spoke about solidarity, and actually this is one of the ethos that we live by on this show, to promote network of experience sharing, so that we can amplify the issues that we're seeing in the different countries in the region, and see how we, civil society and media can lean on each other to draw lessons and draw strength. So solidarity is very, very important. Let me ask your view regarding how all of these, might affect upcoming elections. Yes, Tanzania takes the lead, and thank you for what you said at the start, that the elections are basically on right now. It's something that is already in progress, but we know a lot of attention is going to be focused on the national elections. Uh, all the same, how are all of these impacting on the electoral process, as it were, those elections that are already on and elections that will be taking place later this year and early in January in Tanzania as well as in Uganda? Do you think we will see a good turnout, among citizens? Is there any confidence in among citizens at all in the process as it is playing out right now?
Of course, one of the unfortunate things is that the regimes across the board seem to have adopted violence against citizens. The abductions, the extrajudicial killings, as we speak in Uganda during the last elections, about 150 citizens were shot on the streets, and these are really ordinary citizens that were going on with their work, women, children. Some of them were actually shot in their homes, others were shot just going to the shops to buy home essentials. So because of that nature of brutality, you'll find that citizens will actually get discouraged from taking part in these elections. Now, in Uganda's case specifically, just a few months back, we had an election, a by-election, for one of the constituencies, which is Kawempe. And the level of brutality that was unleashed by the state agents was really, really deplorable. In that, we had the official state apparatus, including the police and the military, coming in, but also, sadly, they created other goons or groups of or gangs of goons that actually came and brutalized citizens under the watch of the police and the military, and they never did anything about it. They came and kicked ballot boxes. In that, if you looked at the voter turnout, actually, which was declared later, it was less than 20% of the voting population for that constituency. Now, that for me actually was more or less a dry run for what is going to happen in the national elections.
Election.
The level of brutality, and of course now, unfortunately, we also have the Chief of Defense Forces, who has really decided to become a laughing stock. He uses his Twitter to send threats of violence to citizens. He has declared that anybody that does not vote for his father in the coming elections is going to face it rough. He has declared war on the opposition, and he's not being called to order by his father, who is the president, but also the different institutions of state are failing to call him to order. He makes threats and he follows them through. and with action in the next days. As we speak, we have a couple of members of the National Unity Platform that have been picked up and arrested, and up to now, they are facing, they are being detained. Initially, they were detained in illegal detention centers, and recently, one of them, called Eddie Mutwe, was presented in court, really tortured, in a deplorable state. And of course, considering that these people are covered widely and broadcast to the media and on social media, it really sends a chilling effect under the spines of citizens. And in that regard, the resultant effect is that, of course, you have citizens fearing to turn up to the polls. In that, Uganda's voter turnout has been declining over the years. If you look at the current by-election that I spoke about a few moments back, the turnout
Yeah.
was less than 20% of the registered voters in that particular constituency. Now, that has a ripple effect in the region, in that you will find, even in Tanzania, I mean, if the leading opposition party has been banned from participating in the elections, it means that the members of that political party will not turn up and vote because they
Yeah.
don't have any candidate to vote for. So naturally, it will mean that there will be a lower voter turnout. But also, one trend that we've been seeing in Uganda over time is that towards elections, people who have money, they leave the country because they are uncertain on what is going to happen, and so they don't vote. And those who don't have enough money retreat to their villages, to their upcountry homes, and in that regard, also they don't participate in the elections. So that is really, really a worrisome and unfortunate trend which affects voter turnout and citizen participation.
Yeah. Thank you, Job. And as we begin to wind up this conversation, do we see any interest amongst the political opposition to pull strength together, as well as amongst civil society groups, to also pull together for them to work together? And then very quickly, I will add, we know the support from the international community is currently challenged, given the situation that has befallen the likes of USAID and many of the implementing partners. But what can the international community help to do to amplify issues around these critical elections coming up in the region?
Yeah, of course, to start with, on terms of the question of solidarity, on the part of civil society, there are really attempts to work together. On the side of the opposition, unfortunately, there's been a lot of polarization. We have a number of formations that have come up in Uganda's case, but sadly, the regime is really working hard to make sure that they disorganize them. So, I mean, there's a lot of bribery that is going on, and of course, you know that political parties in Uganda, it is very difficult for them to mobilize resources. For instance, the private sector, if you are found to be having supported a political party, they will slap on you tax bills, etc., which are of course fake, and so it becomes difficult for a private sector, even private individuals, to actually contribute to these political causes. It becomes really, really difficult. Now, the Political Parties and Organizations Act in Uganda allows political parties to raise more than 200,000. So political parties can't actually get funding from external sources. So it becomes difficult for them. And because of that vulnerability, because of that difficulty, the political position also becomes vulnerable to patronage from the regime, to bribery. And so that way you'll find that a number of there's intrigue emerges, and then the suspicion amongst each other. There have been a lot of claims about opposition figures picking money from the regime, etc., to get compromised, and that, of course, makes them lose confidence in each other. They name call each other, which really makes it difficult for them to get together. and work together. But I know for a fact that there are some discussions which are ongoing between some of them. I remember, for instance, in the 2015, before the 2016 elections in Uganda, there was actually an attempt at a bipartisan approach, which also brought in civil society, where we championed the crusade on electoral reforms in Uganda, which came up with a Citizens Compact that has a range of electoral reform proposals. That moved to a certain level, but it didn't work out so well. I think that has been the closest. There's been discussion around the national dialogue, which again is an initiative that has been championed by civil society, religious leaders, the Elders Forum, and a couple of other political actors. That again, when the government was invited on board, because you can't have such a dialogue without government, they came in and then promised to finance the process. They promised to take lead, and it is now more than 5 years, and that process also was shelved. So the efforts have been there, but they are not really yielding a lot of fruit. And right now, as we speak, like I did mention earlier, one of the leading opposition politicians is in jail. That is Dr. Kiza Besigye.
Yeah.
He was trying to formulate another vehicle, which ideally should have been one of those vehicles that could create an alliance with the leading opposition political party, which is the National Unity Platform. Now, with him in jail, it becomes in a way difficult to even start discussing formation of an alliance, because now the focus is actually of his party is to make sure that he regains his freedom from the regime. So yeah, you'll find, of course, the opposition speaking about uniting, but it's been a bit really difficult.
Yeah.
And the other question that you asked in terms of the international actors,
International
um,
community. Yeah.
yes, the international community. Of course, one of the unfortunate things that is happening is that the international actors, especially donors, because of the inaction by the government on the reforms that they've been proposing over time, the international actors have decided to disengage, which is really unfortunate for Uganda. We have a number of donors that have actually left Uganda because they feel that it is no longer safe for them to operate, but also there are those that have stopped financing democracy-related work because they are saying they are not seeing the dividends of their financing coming through, because the government seems to be lacking the political will to actually put in place a mechanism to ensure that the country experiences proper democracy dispensation. So, of course, the international actors' voice is also important. It does a lot in terms of helping us also to gain traction in pushing back. For instance, I will not be shy to say that the sanctions that have been put on some of the government officials that have been abusing rights, engaging in torture, engaging in brutality against citizens, have actually worked. Those that are engaged in corruption, these sanctions have really worked to cause a restraint on some of the serving security officers, especially in terms of the manner in which they behave. So I think that is one of the actions that the international community can do to make sure that there's accountability for all the actions and inactions of these people that are in charge. That is one of the actions that would be calling upon the international community to make sure that they tighten. The other thing, of course, is the international community shouldn't abandon Ugandans at such a critical moment. This is the worst time to leave Ugandans alone. Already, as we speak, there's a transition that is happening in the country. Of course, you all know that the leader of Uganda is already 80 plus years of age, and he himself has actually said that beyond 75, you no longer have the vigor and the energy to run the country. And we all know that at that age, by biology, someone is nearing their grave. So whether we like it or not, within a certain period of time, he will no longer be in charge. But also, as we speak, he has started ceding power to other people in his family. Of course, we know that he's propelling his son to become the next president of this country, and also a couple of other family members, his in-laws, his brother, his sisters, his wife is also in government, and we know that that transition is already shaping up. So really, for me, the point I need to make to the international community is that this is the time when we need the international community more than ever. So let them not abandon us, let them ally with us and support us in this struggle for the liberation of Uganda from
Uganda.
where we
Thank
have
you.
been.
All right. Thank you so much, Job. I think that is where we will anchor the conversation for today. We're not quite done yet discussing issues related to the civic space environment in Uganda as well as in East Africa. So we really want to appreciate you for the time you've given to speak to us, and we wanted to lend the voice of this platform to uh, on developments in the region and looking more specifically Uganda. And as we move on, also we do more discussions on Tanzania. Uh, I will also include in the description below social media handles for Job and Idea is organization, so that others out there can follow you, follow your writings, follow the work of Idea and how you guys are holding the lines, as it were, in Uganda. So thank you once again, and we appreciate you for the time that you are giving.
Thanks,
So
board, and a great day.
yeah, thanks again to Job for taking us through the issues we just discussed about the state of civic freedom in East Africa. I know we've spent some considerable time looking at issues in Tanzania and more in depth in Uganda. I think one thing that what we can take out of the conversation is indeed the civic is seriously under threat all across East Africa, whether Kenya or Tanzania, or even in the case of Uganda. And the truth is, even from what Job has shared with us, there are some commonalities in the practices that governments across these different countries introduce to restrict space. They pass repressive laws. They seek to muzzle political opposition to the extent that before the election comes, it's almost a fait accompli because the ruling parties just have the feud to themselves to play. Beyond that, also, we've also seen increasing cases of the disappearance of critical opposition voices and the closing of several media establishments. I want to say on this show that it is very important that we still continue to put a shine on what is going on in that part of the world. Democracy is too important to be allowed to fail in East Africa. Um, Democracy is always fought for. It is never handed to us on a platter. And this is the time, really, that citizens in these respective countries, as well as partners and supporters all across the world, should stand and count on the side of democratic activists who are, doing all they can to hold the line, to protect citizens' freedom, to protect human rights, and to protect the right of freedom of association, freedom of expression, and the freedom for them to have a voice in how they are governed in their respective countries. Thank you once again for joining us on today's show. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. For now, I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.